Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that his country is at war, and that is our top focus this hour. The Israel-Palestine conflict has flared up again. Israel has declared war against Palestine's Hamas and vowed to avenge a fierce rocket attack that has killed at least 40 Israelis with what the militants claim was their first strike. Now, Israel has launched airstrikes on the blockaded Gaza Strip. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country is at war and Hamas will pay an unprecedented price. On the other hand, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has declared an emergency situation, this within a range of 80 kilometers from the Gaza Strip. Israeli police have stated that there are believed to be at least 21 active operations in southern Israel, which are ongoing against terrorist groups in the south of the country. Now, while Hamas has launched Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, Israel has launched their own operation called Iron Swords. Meanwhile, the president of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, has issued his first statement. Let me quote him. He says, "We have the right to defend ourselves against Israel and secular terrorism." With Saudi Arabia calling for an immediate de-escalation of war, Israel has declared a state of national emergency in the country. And with that, marks an unprecedented attack on Israel. Remember, this is a country which is known for its sophisticated defense mechanisms. And for that, let's bring you our guest as well. I'm joined in by Colonel Jonathan Conricus, who's the former Israel Defense Forces spokesperson. We'll be going to him in just a bit. But as of now, the latest that we are learning that the death toll has crossed over a couple of dozens. But remember, this is an attack which is of an unprecedented scale. We are learning that close to 5,000 till 7,000 rockets were launched from the Gaza Strip today on Saturday morning. How this pans out is something we'll have to wait and watch. Remember, Israel has already launched a retaliatory operation where they are trying to reclaim property and all those areas which have been occupied by the Hamas terrorists. Remember, it was not just the rockets that were launched from Gaza, but also Palestinian terrorists entering the property as far as Israel is concerned. Several Israelis are currently stranded. They are not provided adequate security or even medical aid at the sites. Remember, it was business as usual for Israel. At the moment, we are also learning that Israel is only trying to gather sources because they were caught very much unaware. In the moment, we'll in fact try and decode the entire ground situation. But for now, let me also play out the headlines for you. Militants fire over 5,000 rockets from Gaza towards Israel. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says, "We are at war," in his first remarks since the fighting began on Saturday morning. Following the October 10 deadline, Canada has started evacuating a majority of its diplomats working in India. As per media reports, the Canadian diplomats are being taken to either Kuala Lumpur or Singapore. The Afghan government has called Pakistan's decision to expel Afghans living in the country without approval unacceptable. A Russian missile attack killed dozens in the northeastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. A day after a strike in the same region killed at least 51 civilians in one of the deadliest attacks in the war in months. This as Western military powers are running out of ammunition to give Ukraine. Rescue operations are underway after flash floods in India's northeastern state of Sikkim left over 100 people missing. Scientists are now exploring whether the strong earthquake that struck Nepal is what triggered a flash flood in the Teesta River basin in Sikkim. And jailed Iranian human rights activist Nargis Mohammadi wins the Nobel Peace Prize, becoming the second Iranian woman to win the coveted Nobel Peace Prize after human rights activist Shireen Ebadi won the award in 2003. Soon after the attack by Hamas on Israel, the world is already getting divided. Reactions have been pouring in from all across the globe. But for now, let's also focus on the reactions that have come in from Israel. To begin with, let me play out what Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has had to say.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה. לא במבצע, לא בסבבים, במלחמה. הבוקר חמאס פתח במתקפת פתע רצחני נגד מדינת ישראל ונגד אזרחיה. אנחנו בתוך זה משעות הבוקר המוקדמות. כינסתי את ראשי מערכת הביטחון. הנחיתי קודם כל לטהר את היישובים מהמחבלים שחדרו פנימה. הפעולה הזאת מתבצעת בשעות הללו. במקביל הוריתי לבצע גיוס מילואים נרחב ולהשיב מלחמה שערה בעוצמה ובהיקף שהאויב לא הכיר. האויב ישלם מחיר שהוא לא ידע כמותו. אני קורא בינתיים לכל אזרחי ישראל להישמע בקפדנות להנחיות הצבא, להנחיות פיקוד העורף. אנחנו במלחמה ואנחנו ננצח בה.
What we're seeing here today is an unprovoked, unprecedented and meditated mass terror attack by Palestinian Hamas terrorists against Israel. Over 2,000 rockets have been indiscriminately fired at Israeli civilians this morning. Hamas terrorists have infiltrated into the country. They've, in cold blood, executed and murdered innocent men, women, children, and the elderly. A number of Israelis have also been taken hostage. To put this in context for you, roughly 1/3 of the country has been under threat of rocket fire this morning. 1/3 of the population of India is roughly 500 million people.
All right. Now we are also joined in by our international news correspondent Abhishek Jha, who's joining me live right now. Abhishek, when we talk about the ground situation to begin with, how challenging is it for Israel, considering it was business as usual when Hamas attacked Israel today on Saturday morning? Take us through what are the potential challenges ahead for Israel as it fights with the infiltrators to reclaim its territory occupied by them.
Well, the first thing is that there are several dozens of people, including soldiers and civilians, women who have been captured alive by the Hamas people. And that has been spreading across the social media. Also, there have been footages which have been released by Hamas. Apparently, people from other nationalities, some of them, including Nepalese, have also been taken hostage by the Hamas side, and they are calling them prisoners of war. So if the Israelis have to kind of free all of them, or they have to, get them back safely, they cannot invade the Gaza Strip with all force without, considering the danger that may cause to the Israelis under the captivity of Hamas. So that is the biggest challenge right now for the Israeli security forces: how to take all those Israeli people who are in captivity of Hamas and Palestine safely back home. How they are going to deal with it? What kind of negotiations will they have around the same situation? Because in the past also the situations such like this has risen when people or the Israelis were taken hostage by these Hamas militants. But those situations were not a warlike situation when both sides are really having a fight or a full-scale war. But the negotiations happened and the back channels talk ensured that these people were free. But this time, how is going to happen? That remains a challenge. Also, the entire security apparatus of Israel, that includes naval, territorial army or the air force capacity, everything seems to have been given a checkmate by the Hamas militants that they didn't have any idea that they'll be facing such a massive onslaught from the Hamas side. And this is where the questions will be raised, but that the Israeli government may wait to answer. Meanwhile, the first priority is to ensure that the infiltrators or the members of the Hamas militia are evacuated or they are sent back to their places. The Israelis who have been taken hostage by these people, they are freed safely and securely. That's the biggest challenge right now for the Israeli forces.
Absolutely. Abhishek, before I let you go, I also want to ask you about the potential spillover of this conflict, considering the Hamas commander has already appealed to Islamic terrorist organizations, whether they are in Syria, Lebanon, or even Iraq, to sort of galvanize and come together in this fight. It certainly doesn't seem like a short-term conflict. Hamas has already gone on to call it the beginning of the Al-Aqsa flood.
Well, Akanksha, while Hamas will try every effort to make the entire war situation a Muslim brotherhood, or to support the events or the steps taken by Hamas since today morning, that remains to be seen how much of real backing it will get from other than countries like Iran, Syria, or Iraq, because there's a sizable population or the strength of the Gulf countries who are not supporting the violent ways of Hamas to raise the cause of Palestine. that includes Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, there are geopolitical alignments also, especially in the wake of what is happening in Russia and Ukraine. While several nations, especially among NATO and EU members, have condemned the actions of Israel, Russia has termed them a result of what has been there for decades and and how the US has failed to negotiate a peace
Right.
between the two sides that has eventually led to this situation of today. So there's a very calculated and calibrated stances that different countries are taking on the latest issue. And the entire response of the world community will depend on the next 48 hours or 24 to 48 hours how the situation unfolds on ground in Israel.
Absolutely, it is an unfolding situation, and CNN News 18 will continue to stay on top of everything that's happening in Israel. Many thanks to you, Abhishek Jha, for bringing in all those latest inputs. Also, CNN News 18's Siddhant Mishra spoke with Alvite Ningthujam, who's a Gulf region expert, on what does Israel going to war with Palestine again really means. Listen into this conversation.
So we are speaking at a time when the Hamas forces have invaded southern parts of Israel, and perhaps we have been told that more than 22 Israelis have been killed, more than 500 Israelis have got injured, maybe more than 30 to 35 Israelis have been held hostage by Hamas forces. How do you look at this situation and perhaps the escalation, which could have a larger ramification, not just for the Palestinian state, but whole of West Asia?
See, thank you, Siddhant, for having me once again on the show. You already have given a very fascinating statistics, fascinating to us because we are the researchers and we go by the statistics also. But then with what's happening on the ground, it is also a kind of an indication that we are in for a long haul. The name of the operation, which has been announced by Hamas, Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, also hints at a major escalation which they are looking at, and I'm sure a scale of this nature they might have been preparing for the last many months. And at the same time, the name being given as Al-Aqsa also talks about there's also a symbolism added to it that unless and until the entire Israeli-Palestinian or the issue of Jerusalem as a capital of whoever becomes a full-fledged country is going to remain as one of the most important sticking points in any negotiations or mediations that would come up between the two sides.
So what we are getting to know from perhaps what the Israeli media is reporting, even at some places they are mentioning name of Hezbollah. They mention the name of Hezbollah. Then they also say that they also suspect the participation of militant groups in Syria, in Lebanon. So they are calling it a combined, coordinated attack. And they say that it has been done in such a manner that Israel cannot counter it. How do you look at it? Though we are still awaiting the full assessment.
I think that's I wouldn't be surprised, Siddhant. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a three-prong war.
Okay.
One should not be under the impression that it's going to be it's only going to be between the Hamas or PIJ or with Israel IDF. You have a very volatile situation particularly along the northern part of Israel and also on the northeastern part of Israel bordering the Syrian frontier. So any 3 or 4 outfits or terrorist organizations, whatever you call it, from whatever angle you look at, extremist groups or non-state actors, I wouldn't be surprised because that is one of the nightmares the Israeli Defense Forces or the military security planners also have been having for the longest time. If you have seen the Netflix series Fauda, you have seen in the 4 episodes, you have seen, a very real-time sort of the dynamics of what Israel is facing at the moment. The last episode talks about the Lebanon-based Hezbollah. So I won't be surprised if any of these forces combine together. And to me, what is very interesting is the juncture at which this conflict has suddenly escalated. Why I'm saying this is because, see, if you look at 50 years ago, on 6th of October, a combined forces of Syria and Egypt launched something called October War. That went on from 6th of October to 25th of October, 1973. And we are now in 2023, 7th October. So, the kind of parallels that we have drawn of bringing in 4 or 5 actors targeting the Israeli security forces as one cohesive unit, I think it also sends out a kind of a message to the Israelis that you can always be in for a surprise.